Okay, the next topic is going to be the cruise industry trends. So the cruise industry has experienced several pivotal events in 21st century. Um, let's discuss the first one, which is 9/11 attacks and their aftermath. Do you have something to say about that?
Well, everything that needs to be said about 9/11 was said, but the story still goes on about how it happened, and I feel that we don't know truly what really
We don't know.
happened and what the causes were. I think it affected the psyche of the American people, and what I could say is that almost 50% of all cruising source markets come from North America.
Okay.
So it would have impacted in some way the psyche of the American people, and that in a way affected the market. However, I'm not sure at the time what the sales were, but most people that are cruising, are around the edges of America. New York has only a short season of cruising, so the impact globally, I don't think was so
It was
great.
not much. Okay.
But then it's about the risk to travel that had a psychological impact for some people. When this happened, and we had lots of stories at the time about security. What are the threats of terrorism to a cruise ship? How easy is it to get access to the ship? And that's why ISPS became very
ISPS,
important, because you create
barriers
around the port as a safety mechanism. In fact, one important thing about ISPS is that I was involved in 2001 in the G8 summit when it was in Genoa, because it was on 3 festival ships.
Okay.
And and there were riots at that point, but the fact we had the port, everything was safe.
Yeah.
So that ISPS and the boundaries, almost a fortification lines, were really helpful for the G8 summit, which was marred by all these terrible riots. And
It was in Geneva.
in Genoa, yes.
Geneva.
I was living in Genoa at the time. So I think in that sense, security, the impact on security, the threat of a terrorist attack on a cruise ship, because what we all realize in the industry is that if any ship gets affected by terrorism, that's it for the whole industry.
Yeah, true.
Because
very difficult
collectively, the industry really worked hard on security, and likewise the ports. People would think twice about security on the itineraries. They wouldn't necessarily go to a place without ISPS, So I think those things came into view more, and the fundamental psyche of the greatest source market on earth for cruising, which is the Americans. So that affected them. However, it wasn't a dramatic effect on the cruise industry.
Not significant.
It was about the risk more than anything else that was that caused a lot of concern at the time.
So, okay, Costa Concordia disaster 2012. This has been a major disaster.
It was a disaster, and it did affect cruising. And I've been on that ship, I must have been 20 times. I was a consultant to Costa at the time for training, training the crew and preparing them before they went on board for training in the different schools around the world. And I knew a lot of people on board at the time, and I heard the harrowing stories that they experienced, and it was really a terrible thing. The ship was off course, and we all know that now. It was off course, but it was always off course. Yeah, so it always went off course around that area. It just happened to hit that underwater mountain and the peak of it, and it got that
maybe
big gash.
I think the bridge team was distracted at that time.
No, that's what the stories
Yeah.
say. They weren't monitoring it properly. I don't think they were really distracted. They just weren't following protocol. That's the problem. These stories about the international hostess distracting the captain and all that was happening all the time.
Yeah.
That was a normal distraction,
yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest.
yeah.
You know, and the waving of the people on the shore, that's a story for the media, you know, because the reason why the ship went closer to the shore, and many captains used to do it, I don't think they do it anymore,
For the signal.
is not to wave to the passengers on the shore and all that. I mean, that may have happened, but it wasn't the reason. It's because it was gala night.
Was
And
that?
if you sail closer to the shore, the ship is calmer. Yeah?
That's also.
And that was the reason they used to care about the guests on board and not, you know, disturbing the ship while they're having a gala dinner.
Yeah.
And that used to happen a lot. But of course, if you're going off course and you don't have your radar on and nobody's looking at it, that's a problem, a big problem.
True.
You know, and what they claimed, it's not on the maps,
Yeah.
on the physical maps,
Yeah.
but it would have been on the radar. So, you know, nautically, I don't want to comment too much because it's not my field.
Yeah.
But I know that those sorts of attractions happen all the time. But A, you don't go off course. You don't, because it's been mapped out. Yeah, if you're a captain, and B, you know, B, you know, you can't just go off course because of a gala dinner or something like that. You can't get distracted. And B, you always have a navigational officer watching the radar, always,
Yeah.
come what may. And even if you've done it a million times before, you know, you still have to follow that. And now, you know, Carnival have been very proactive since. They've learned, and they've got a fantastic, I've seen it, I've been there, witnessed it myself in Miami. They've got an amazing operational center where they can see the tracking of all the ships.
the ships, yeah.
And I've been to
In
it.
real time.
In real time, yes, yes. And every ship is being tracked. And many other cruise lines, I've seen the one of MSC as well, and it's impressive. And I know they all have, and they've been very proactive. So whilst it was tragic, I believe it was 36 people passed away, which was awful and tragic. Many of them panicked and hid in their cabins and drowned. But there were heroes. The cruise director, who I trained many times, he helped many guests swim to safety in the rocks. Can you believe that? Unbelievable.
The water must have been cold as well, yeah?
Freezing.
Freaking cold.
I have a friend that was on board at the time. She was in training in HR, and she had a pink dress on and stilettos
Okay.
when this happened. And they had the call to go to the cabin, and she's been on board many times. She knew something was wrong, big wrong, and she went straight to the lifeboat. She went straight there. She didn't go to the cabin. She went straight to the lifeboat because she knows that when you're crew, you go to life raft.
Yeah.
And that decision was, you know, she had stilettos on a pink dress, and she still went straight to the muster station. Yeah, and not going back to the cabin or nothing like that. And that's what you're supposed to do. So that was, you know, she told me, I knew something was wrong. And I had many, you know, first-hand witness accounts of what happened there. You know, it was bad. Of course, what the captain did was wrong.
That was very wrong.
Profoundly wrong. Yeah. Now, since then, they do psychometric tests, which I was calling for before the Concordia. I was in the training world. In my view, every captain had to have a psychometric test. I was doing leadership training as one of the things that I'd suggested, that all captains go through psychometric testing, which now happens as mandatory. But at the time, it wasn't happening. So I think we've got the right checks and balances in place now.
No.
And remember that what I said earlier, you have to make mistakes to learn. And sometimes those mistakes are catastrophic. But sometimes the bigger the mistake, the bigger the change.
Yeah, yeah.
And that has happened in the cruise industry. So I truly believe we've learned, and Costa's learned it heart out of Costa,
Hard way. Yeah.
which is an incredible brand
Yeah.
for over 70 years. You know, this is an amazing brand, and you know, and the people were really, there was a dark cloud over Genoa for a long time after that incident. But you know, we've learned a lot, and I believe that's been spread across the whole industry.
For sure.
And complacency is a lot less now,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
a good thing.